So I'm going to go ahead and say these are the absolute best SCX24 axles I've ever ran. Possibly my favorite new axle overall. You guys know I love the FCX axles, but I was normally a straight axle guy. And these just have the performance. The way these axles are clocked in the front, look at that. That right front totally just dug into that and pulled the rear up. This truck had no chance at making that climb before this front axle was installed. Absolutely brilliant design, perfect clocking of the steering hub, which we'll talk about later. But this truck, I could just put it anywhere I wanted because these axles are laid out so well and the steering is so good. Watch this maneuver. Slick. This thing, unbelievable now. You'll see on this climb right here, I'm able to use the steering to get me more traction to get up this. Okay, so the front with the C-hubs being clocked a bit, and like I said, we will take a look at that in a bit. But look at the angle of the steering you get on these things, and it just helps you so much. I'm basically able to make this climb over this peak of this rock right here just because the front like digs and hooks like a freaking anchor. Just perfect. I'm absolutely in love with these axles. I don't know that there is a better axle at this point. TRX4M, don't even compare. The FCX, I mean, I like those axles. They're tough, but these axles right here are probably just as tough. We're going to find out, but they are super meaty and they are very impressive straight away. What's up, guys? Matt here, coming at you with a quick look at these new X15 axles from MofoRC for the SCX24. These are some axles that a lot of people have been waiting a good while on, and I got to say they look pretty promising. All right, now these are the X15 because they are plus 15 millimeters, so they're 7.5 millimeter wider on each side. And I know that sounds crazy wide, but when you compare it to what we do with most of these SCX24 axles, it's about right on par. If you look at that, that is almost exactly where this one is sitting. So I'm going to be installing this one onto this truck. I thought I had messed up and ordered the wrong ones. I wanted to just get a front and rear, but I got 4-wheel steer. So I went back and I looked at my receipt, and I did actually order the front and rear. I just somehow got the 4-wheel steer combo, which is fine. I'm just going to put these on the front. I don't really break the rear shafts, so I'm fine with just running the wider axles and stuff on the back. These do require a special servo mount, the best servo mount ever, that is specifically made for these axles. So it doesn't go over the diff cover like the original SCX24 servo mount does. So we're going to mount this up and get it installed on this truck. First off, I want to take a look at a few things about these. The main key thing right here is these are kind of pre-clocked. So if you don't know what that is, a lot of times we will roll the axle down, way down like this, so that we can get a better steering angle. Well, these, you're able to keep your drive shaft pitched where it should be, and they're already rolled in the C-hub here. So you've already got that cocked back, which brings your steering link up some, just gives you added clearance there, and a really nice turning angle. So when these turn, they're almost kind of digging in. You can see how they're gonna, it's almost like cocking it like this, but not quite that far. But that is very nice that these are already pre-clocked. I would like to see some that we could just kind of adjust how we wanted, but I think this is a pretty perfect angle here looking at it. So we'll find out. And then the other thing is these are just very meaty. These are some of the tougher CVDs that we've had so far for the SCX24, but even these, I've broke quite a few of them. I'm not going to break these, I don't believe. These look like FCX axle shafts inside of a SCX housing, basically. They look pretty meaty. So I'm going to pull one of these out so we can kind of compare the size of them, and then we'll get this thing installed and just run it a little bit. You know, you're not going to be able to tell a whole lot about it, but I can kind of give you my opinion on the clearance and stuff. It does say that you're going to need to pull them apart and grease everything up with the included udder butter sample there. So we'll get everything greased up. You do have to change out your rod end, your ball studs, on your links and stuff, because these require a larger screw into them. So I mean, it's almost just like putting an FCX axle on one of these things, but minus the portals, so, and worm gears. It's the only thing I'm not really excited about. But we're gonna install these on here, see how it runs, and then maybe later I'll get this one installed on something else. This is really one of the only few trucks I have left that runs SCX axles. So I'm gonna install it on here and then we'll check it out. I definitely look forward to getting rid of all these wideners and stuff. I'll be interested to see how the weight of this axle compares to this. I do have some brass on here, the Samex knuckles, and then these wideners and diff cover and stuff. So be interested to see how that compares. I do normally just prefer the plastic housing. It just slides so much better. But I think we're gonna have some good clearance on these. These are very similar to like the Super 8s, the way the diff cover mounts into the rear. So you can see here, very similar as far as that goes. One thing I'm not so sure, I kind of like how clean these are right here. We don't have the big C-hub that may hang up on stuff, but if it allows us to have the clockable C-hub, you know, I'm all for that. The other thing is these are way meatier than something like these Super 8s. I don't know how well you can see that, but definitely not gonna break these. Whereas I will eventually at some point snap these off. I know I will. All right, I got this pulled apart and I just kind of wanted to show you guys. One of the best things about these is it really kind of works like the FCX axles. Like I said, we're now kind of capturing this pin right here with the bearing in the steering block. So we're not gonna have to worry about that pin falling out. That's a much better design than most of these that we've kind of had for the SCX24, which we kind of had to rely on one of these sleeves. One of the issues we had with the very first ones was these pins would just fall out, lose that pin out of there, and then your CVD is just going to fall apart. After looking, these are actually supposed to be nearly 3 times the size of the stock SCX24 axles, and they're like almost double the size of something like these. So they are very beefy, as you can tell just by looking at that joint right there. Look at the difference in that. Crazy. So these are not going to break. These are going to be bulletproof, basically. One thing to know is you will want to take everything apart. Take it all apart and use some thread lock on these, because you do not want these screws coming out. These are the ones that go into here. Those come out, you're going to lose these little spacers and you're shot. I think Nick is going to be offering some packages with those screws and little spacers there or whatever. So hopefully that's something we can get separately. But just go ahead, pull it all apart and grease your gears, and then put thread lock on everything. I'm going to go ahead and put some overdrive in here because these do not come with overdrive, and I want overdrive in the front. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pulling this apart. We'll get some overdrive in here and then we'll go run this thing. So comparing the weight of these two, I am going to lose quite a bit of weight with this axle. I didn't order the brass parts for this. He does have brass parts for these. So that's something you may want to consider when you order these axles. Go ahead and get some of that brass if you need it. This axle is sitting at 81 grams. It has a lot of brass parts going on there. And this one is at 45. So we're losing quite a bit of weight there. This truck is set up, everything's pretty low. So with a good set of wheels and stuff, we may not need all of that. It's just kind of what I'd added, honestly, really to get these wideners and stuff. So we may be okay. One thing after looking at these, when I was putting the Loctite and everything, I really like how the steering link is designed. It's kind of captured in between the C-hub there. And you don't need these rubber O-rings. If you guys can see that, you probably know that both of those O-rings right there are starting to split. They just kind of dry out, get dry rotted, and they crack and break off. And then you're trying to deal with putting new ones on or whatever. So I like this design right here. Everything turns nice and smooth and you don't have to worry about those O-rings. These also do support your normal worm gears. So I was able to put the Mofo overdrive, I put the 33% or whatever it is in there. So we're gonna have a lot of overdrive in the front here. I'm hoping that will help me get some wheel speed. I may have to go change the rear and put some more standard overdrive in there, or maybe I'll just go with these same ones to get all of the wheel speed I can out of these worm gears. So I did get those installed and getting ready to throw them in the truck, and we'll be ready to run. So these went on very easily. You have everything you need, tons and tons of screws and rod ends and everything. Just kind of figuring out what screws go where. The upper links can reuse your hardware that you have on the SCX24, basically. So you can reuse your screws there, which was nice because you can see what I do a lot of times is leave the plastic links up top. It just keeps the weight down. And then I use what I want on the lowers. Honestly, I have the brass in the rear here just because that's the way this truck ended up laid out. I didn't have another brass set for the front, so it is what it is. My stuff is always mixed and matched because I'm taking it apart, putting it on this, that, whatever. I love, look how that steering angle is, that steering block is cocked back. So this thing is going to hook and dig like crazy when we're trying to climb and we cock those wheels just a little bit. It's going to be insane. We'll get the wheels on here in just a second and we'll check it out. The other thing, I just keep finding stuff that I really like here. I wasn't a big fan of these wheel nuts that are on there originally. You know, it says just use some Loctite on them. I change my wheels a lot, so I don't really like putting Loctite on every time I do that. But he does include regular wheel nuts with the nylon lock washer in there. So the good thing is these are made to fit your standard tool for the SCX24. That's why he included that. Makes a lot of wheels where it's hard to get the tool inside of the wheel much easier than these larger wheel nuts. You guys know if you run the FCX, some wheels it's very hard to get that larger wheel nut in there. So both are included. It looks like there's several of these in there as well. Hopefully maybe we can get these separate also, but absolutely love how these went together. The steering angle looks insane, and it looks like that steering link is really up out of the way. So these are going to be some very nice axles. So the only thing I see that's going to be somewhat of an issue for some people on these is just your clearance here and here. A lot of wheels are just not going to work unless you add wideners, which is defeating the purpose of wider axles somewhat. But you can see like these are not going to fit at all. We are going to be rubbing like crazy, almost even rubbing here, and I'm going to lose that. But we're definitely rubbing on the steering, whereas like these, we can run these wheels and they will clear everything fine. Obviously that's sitting pretty close. The wheels just keep getting bigger for these things, so we almost just have to keep going wider to get the clearance. But same thing with these trail wheels. You can see they fit on there really well. Tons of clearance on the steering link here. But when you put them on these, we're going to be rubbing. So you are going to have to choose your wheels wisely. These really don't want to work. See that? Now, I mean, obviously we can put a wider hex and help that, or some wideners, but just something to note. There we've got tons of clearance. I would actually be hitting the weight hanger with these wheels on this one, so I wouldn't run that maybe, but that's just having a little smaller setup here. Makes your wheel choices much easier, but to me it's going to be worth just having to do something like this. These are the same wheels right here. I just flip the hex so that they're kind of a deep dish, and they have basically a zero offset, and these will work on here. One thing you can do if you are wanting to run a wheel like this is get a wider hex, and the TRX4M hex work great. I will link these in the description. I have been using these on my Tarantula build. Really like the way these are set up. You can get them in a 6mm, a 10mm, which is what these are, and then a 10mm with the weight like these. This is for the SCX, but same exact setup for the TRX4M. So these will work to get your stance just a little bit wider to where you can run a different wheel like this. You see it spaces it off of that C-hub right there. And I'm going to be able to get away with these wheels, which also gives me enough that I can clear the shock for the most part. We're getting so much steering out of this that, you know, we're probably going to be in that shock a little bit. I may switch these to the hard part shocks because they have the little piece here that spins just for that reason. But I did want to just kind of note that the TRX4M hex work great. The other thing I really like about these is the wheel nut that they come with right here also fits your standard tool for the SCX24. And this is one of the tools that come with the old RC four-wheel drive stamped steelies. I use this all the time and people are like, where'd that come from? I don't know. I guess they still come with those, but the original RC four-wheel drive stamped steelies had these with them. I think you can buy these from RC four-wheel drive if they still sell them, but you'll see with that, you can get the wheel on there and then tighten this down. Now, another thing here that I really like about these axles is, check this out. I can really crank that down. That is super tight. Wheel still spins nice and free. You can't do that with really any SCX24 axle I've tried. Even these, if you crank that wheel nut down, it's just not moving. Like your wheel gets stuck. That's just an issue with most of the SCX24 axles. These are super tight. Like, that's really tight. And look how free that is. So there's not going to be any issue with that. And with these wideners, I think I'm really going to like this stance. Like I said, these tires are just getting so big for most of these rigs now. We just keep having to go wider. I mean, look at these things. And I'm going to get these mounted up and we'll check them out. I don't think they're going to fit on here, but maybe something like this. We can run these. I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of the original of these, but this compound feels a little bit better. So maybe these will be a little better. We'll try these out at some point. I just got to get them mounted up. But these hex, I think, are a great addition to these axles. So I'm busting out some of the old full send RC rear shafts here. You can see it gives me just a little bit more thread than these. I don't even remember what these are. They're a plus something. But these right here, much beefier, give me a little more threads. Those with the wideners that I had on here originally equal out to almost the same width as the front. I haven't measured it, but looking at it, it looks the same. And so I'm going to be very happy with that. And then I have another one of these freaking sweet Mofo front axles for another truck. So maybe that's the way to go. So I wanted to do a quick test really fast with these two because they are very similar in the wheelbase. You can see almost the same length exactly. This layer is slightly wider, which probably should hurt it. This with the MofoRC X15 axle on it is just a little more narrow. I have kind of moved the screw to the back on this axle, trimmed some things, cut, and basically I'm getting all that I can out of this. So I'm curious how it compares with this setup. Now, one thing you'll notice is how well the drive shaft is tucked in here because of the way these axles are designed with the drive shaft up top, and we don't have to roll the axle itself to clock this. Whereas this one, you can see the drive shaft hanging down because I have rolled the entire axle to get the same effect, but I had to roll the axle. I couldn't just change the C-hubs. So that drive shaft does hang down. But let's run a quick little turning test here, just see how they compare. All right, so I'm just gonna go full left and then I'll mark the outside tire. Again. Look at that difference. That is huge. Huge difference. That's insane. Okay, let's try this Slayer build with the TRX4M axle, because we know that these axles get some really good turning angle to them. This is almost the same wheelbase as both of those. I mean, exactly the same as the other Slayer, basically. So let's try it with this and see where we get. I just wanted to jump in here really quick and mention that I did mess up a slight bit when I placed the stick between the first two trucks. The first truck with the FCX axles, I placed it on the outside of the tire. Then when I ran with the X15s, I placed it like in line with the tire. So it's basically the width of the tire that I did fudge a bit. I didn't want anybody to think I was trying to cheat that. I just realized it when I was editing the video. So there is about a tire width difference there of where the X15s actually made it, but they still blow everything out of the water. Nowhere near as good as these axles. Unbelievable. All right, next we're gonna try the K10 here. This is still all stock as far as links and axles and everything. These are known to have really good steering angle. Look at that, okay? So I wanted to test this against the new Mofos. And just so you can see, not a huge difference in wheelbase. Now I know there's a lot of variables here. People are gonna be like, well, you're not running the same tires or whatever, but I'm just trying to give an idea just to show you guys how extreme these things are. So we're not far off on wheelbase or width, honestly. Okay, look at that. It's not like a huge difference or anything, so let's try this. I did move this back just a little bit so that the tires were starting at the same point, because the rear bumper on this body was hitting my little piece of cardboard there. So it wasn't gonna allow me to start the tires in the exact same position. I want it to be as fair as possible. You can see where the Mofo axles stopped right there. And this is, I mean, a whole truck width difference, basically. That's huge. So right here, you'll see normally I have to back up on this turn with most trucks, especially one that's stretched and kind of longer like this one sits. These axles turn on a dime. I mean, it's crazy. You know, I said earlier that you probably wouldn't be able to notice much in the running what the axles were doing, but I think you can tell. They're almost just like having a grapple and just like hooking and being able to rotate the truck around them. The way that they're clocked just perfect, mixed with the really good steering angle. You know, we've had CVDs that give us a really good steering angle, and we've kind of been able to clock our axles by using longer links on the bottom and that sort of thing. But then you get into your drive shaft really showing and sticking out and dragging. And these, they're just perfect. I mean, they work great. And I ended up going with, right here, most trucks, look, if you guys watch the channel a lot, most trucks, when I go to make that right turn, it washes out. You slide to the left there quite a bit, you know, you can make it. But this one just, it was super simple, you know, because it just hooked and went. So I just kind of started playing around, trying some different lines, seeing where I could kind of make this thing go. And honestly, this truck, it's probably maybe one of my top 5 or 6 performers. I mean, it's not like the best performer I have, but this axle took it to another level. Like, it definitely bumped it up. So I could just imagine slapping this axle on a Slayer or something, you know, just going to be unreal. Here's this line again, just really using the front to kind of dig in and get a little pressure on the rear so that it's able to pull up over that kind of washout there on the bottom left. It just works. I mean, I am running the overdrive in the front of this. I went with the Mofo 33% overdrive in the front, just standard gear in the rear, and it's a really good combination. I've got really good wheel speed with this truck. I was actually pretty surprised. So the Cedar motor in here, with this setup on 3S, like, I actually have enough wheel speed to do some of my hopping lines that normally I cannot get an SCX24 to do, really. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, you need to run this motor with this pinion and whatever, you know, to get the wheel speed with the SCX24 axles. And I know, like, I've built a lot of fast rigs with SCX24 axles. But just like hopping over that right there, usually when I would do that, if it missed I snap the CVD like instantly. On any SCX24 axle I've ran until now, none of them were strong enough to deal with a lot of the situations I would put them in, you know. And it's not because I'm just full on dumb, you know, and like just people say, oh, you got to not pin the throttle when you're in a bind. No, like I'm trying stupid stuff, like hopping over stuff and launching down things like that, and things break if they're not beefy. So that's why these axles right here are bringing me back to the SCX24 builds. Like really, you know, now I'm very excited to build some more rigs with these axles, because I can not only get the wheel speed, but I can actually use it without breaking the axles. Okay, so that was really my main issue with the SCX24 axles to start with. You know, yeah, the worm gears, like I'm not a huge fan, but with something like this 33% overdrive in the front, I'm getting some pretty good speed out of that. I may go with a little more in the rear, just so I've got even more wheel speed there. And just running the Cedar motor here, which is not like crazy fast, this can compete with most of my stuff, you know. So I'm pretty thrilled with these, and definitely think these axles are the way to go for anybody wanting that ultimate build. You know, they come at a little higher price. I was running the FCX axles. Part of the reason I was using those a lot too is because I was getting a full axle for $13 when they first came out, you know, and then they realized they were super popular and everybody was buying them, and they doubled the price. But even at that, they're still quite a bit cheaper than something like this, but they don't have as much to offer. Now, if you want to go portals, like, yeah, that's cool. One thing that really bugs you with the portal gears and stuff on these is all that slop. So I'm really excited to be back to this straight axle where I'm not going to have all that slop in the gearing. And look at that. It's just like nothing, straight up that. These Galaxy 3S batteries, that's what's in here right now. They are insane. The best 3S batteries I've ran so far. So that helps as well, you know. So everything's just progressed, and I'm very happy to see these axles. They are hands down the best axles, I think, for the mini, micros, whatever you want to call them, period. Another positive to the worm gears is, you know, not everybody wants to go brushless and spend that money. So you can stay brushed with really some kind of crappy electronics. I mean, that's why Axial probably put the worm gears in to begin with, is they can put very low-end electronics with them and get a good slow crawl. So if you just want to bump up speed, get you a little better motor for speed, and you can get it done, you know. So these are just the way to go. In my opinion, I'm blown away by how good they really are, honestly. I just thought it was going to be another SCX24 axle that had a couple of cool features and whatever. But this will be the axle I'm using for a good while.